Alright guys, so I've been getting a lot of questions about the flow ride frame and my build and the way it all fits together and all those things since I put those two videos up just kind of talking about, you know, this platform that I've settled on. So I want to take some of my most asked questions and some of my most inquired about items and just throw them in a video for you guys. So here goes. So the first thing I want to talk about are accessories. Now, I'm using the Brain3D accessories. I didn't necessarily buy the package because I didn't want the arm guards. Not that they hurt anything. You want that, that's cool. But I'm using the GoPro TPU mount, and I prefer the front load versus the one that loads in the side. This is 30 degrees, and usually I even stick a wedge underneath the back just to give me that extra 5 degrees because I run a 25 degree camera tilt. I am also using the SMA antenna holder that mounts over the back two standoffs. Now I'll show you what that looks like installed in just a minute. The last items that I'm using are the standoff mounted FPV camera mounts. And these are the 27mm mounts. Now that's really important if you're running a Runcam Micro Eagle. Because some of the other mounts that you will find have these bump outs. And they're made for smaller cameras, okay? These will not work for the Micro Eagle. You've got to look like these. They got to be coming straight off. Otherwise, it's never going to fit. There won't be enough room for the Micro Eagle. Now, you also want to be careful because as you are at Brain3D and looking for those 27mm mounts, you could notice the other mention of the 27mm mounts. Come on, focus. There we go. Which are these pressure mounts. And these are a little weird what they actually do for like a Runcam Swift. They will not work with the Eagle. Is part of the Swift's orange frame fits inside of here, and this goes over the standoffs, and it just kind of sandwiches and holds it in there with pressure. So, not knowing any better, I also ordered these, and I may be able to use them for something, so I'm not, you know, upset or anything, because I ordered a whole bunch of them. But yeah, you need these 27mm standoffs. If you don't get the 27mm standoffs, and you have a Micro Eagle, it's never gonna work. Now let's talk about the SMA antenna mount in the back. If you are going to be using a 20x20 board back here, this mount will not fit without being modified. So, if I tilt this up like this, you can see, in fact maybe it's even better like that I've had to notch and cut off some of that mount, okay? Because when you look at this, that board sticks out too much, or the standoffs are too close to the board, or whatever you want to say, it, you know, for whatever reason you want to say, it is not going to fit. So I had to cut them off. Now that's not an issue because usually when you get pressure, you're going to get it this way from a crash, and so the pressure is pushing right against the standoffs. And even if you were to get some reverse pressure from, like, you know, coming backwards into the ground, this is still really strong. These are printed really thick, so I have no concerns about doing that. Just know that these are not going to fit without being modified. And then here, just for good measure, I can show you the Eagle mounts and the way I have the Eagle mounted. Now, you'll notice that I have the mounts flipped around backwards because normally the mount is going to come back this way. There we go. It's going to come back this way, and that will help the camera sit back inside the frame more for a little bit more protection. Now, if you look here, you're talking about maybe 8mm of difference there. So it's not much. You're still going to get a lot of the camera hanging out, and it still could potentially be damaged in a crash. So for me, it just wasn't a big deal. It wasn't worth making enough stink over because I have the cap and the receiver mounted in, you know, in front of the stack behind the camera, and I could not get the camera in there with the mounts flipped the other way. So it's kind of minor. I'm still kind of throwing around if I might be able to switch something around, but I really like the way everything fits in here the way it is. So I'm not too concerned about it. Now, I have my 4-in-1 ESC mounted below just a flight controller cover, is what you call these. And what I have double-sided tape to that, you know, using some of this 3M VHB, is my TBS Unify. Now, I was really hoping when I was initially setting this up to get the XM receiver mounted up here with it, but these just take up too much room. And the last item that you're going to have to keep in mind, if you go to use this TPU mount and you have a 20mm stack back here or a 20mm board, is that if you have an SMA connector that is coming out straight, it is not going to fit with the board there. So, if you have an SMA connector like this, there's just not enough room with the angle there to be able to mount inside of the TPU mount here and still give room for the board. Even with bending this thing up, I actually broke 2 of them trying to get a good bend, and I tried heating them up and nothing was helping. So what I had on hand, and I ended up using, initially I wasn't considering it, is I have an SMA connector with a right angle. And just kind of putting it up in the middle, it hits that top plate when you install it. But if you just turn it to the side, come right next to the standoff, then it fits in there perfectly. It doesn't make any contact with the board, and that's important because this is my flight controller. So I don't want things bumping this and all that other jazz. Alright, so those are the things that, you know, that I've been asked a lot, and the things that I've discovered as I've been using this in regards to the fitment, the placement, and just the general installation of all the components. So just to be totally transparent with everything, just so you know everything that I'm doing, here's the top plate. Now, I have, at least for now, I have my receiver antennas coming up into these forever tubes, and I don't have anything else mounted on my top plate. And that's because that's a real pet peeve for me. I don't like things installed on my top plate because then when I pull it off, I have to worry about, you know, if something's stuck on there, I got to unplug something. And you guys don't realize, but some of these plugs are not meant to be plugged, unplugged, plugged, unplugged, plugged, unplugged forever. And you'll actually destroy your connector and end up either having to replace it or get a replacement board. I'm just not a fan of having things stuck to my top plate. And so when I go to install this, the first thing I'll do is slide my XMA connector up through there, and then I just push my wires into these and get them started, and they, you know, sit right down there against the bottom plate. Of course, you can't normally even see that much. Because this is in the way. Well, once I have that going, everything else fits great. Now, the last thing, I'll put a link to these items that I'm using as materials or supplies in this. I have a silicone pad here that, right now, it's a little dirty and dull, but if I run it under some hot water, oh, come on, camera. If I run it under some hot water, maybe even some hot soapy water, and just let it air dry, it actually gets really tacky. And I always put this on top my top plate, and I use that in place of Velcro. So on my batteries, I don't have Velcro. I don't have to worry about Velcro. I don't even have that other stuff. I forget what you call it. I don't use any of that anymore. All I use is this pad, and I don't worry about gluing it down or zip tying it down, because once you get it on there and you get the battery strapped down, it's got pressure, and there's your friction. I'm going to be totally honest. Ever since I started using these, I have not had a single battery ejection. Not one. Not a single broken strap. I mean, my battery is just there. It's holding on. Nothing's getting damaged. I mean, that's exactly what you want when you crash, and it's even saved this fat man some walks of shame, because, you know, then I can just throw turtle mode, flip myself over, and at least get back to myself. So those are the most common things people have been asking me how I did. None of these items that I have on here I consider optional, because I tried running without some of the items, like for instance this SMA mount. I tried running without that and just kind of putting this underneath the top plate and having it come straight out the back. The problem is that these blades, or sorry, these props, run so closely together. It's running a slam type format where that top plate is low also, and there's just not a lot of room, and I was actually getting my antennas banged up. I have a TBS Triumph that was getting just completely mauled by these, and the props were wearing their way through the casing. I haven't had any problems with that since I went with the SMA mounts, so that's that, guys. I hope it helps. Happy crashing.